This is Tucker, Sales Director with DCA, and we are going over how to write a contract. Okay, so let's say you're a buyer's agent and you just showed this house, 671 Northeast Gold Dust Road, and your clients want to make an offer. The listing price is $195, and let's say that they want to make an offer, full price offer, and they're putting 20% down. They are pre-approved and doing a conventional mortgage. So, how do we write the contract? Well, first thing we're going to do is we are going to open up Form Simplicity. We've got that open. We're going to go back to the MLS and we are going to pull up that listing. So we have the info in front of us. We're going to hit the property appraiser button and we're going to pull up the property appraiser. And we have all the pertinent information at our fingertips. We can write this contract. Now these customers are writing an as-is offer. And so an as-is offer in comparison to the standard offer is just how it sounds. As is they can still inspect it, they can still get financing, but they are agreeing to take the property as is and not requiring, at least initially, any specific repairs or any specific condition of the property other than the condition it is in when they see it at the time of the offer. So here's my as-is contract. Happens to be right at the top because these are in alphabetical order. As you look through these forms, you will be using all different kinds, but what we're going to do most of the time is look for the FAR bar, Florida Realtors, Florida bar. See how this is AA. You'll see some that are just different sources, listing agreement, commissions, and forms. Just different types, miscellaneous contracts. If there are two documents that are maybe very similar or have similar titles, let's say FHA and VA addendums, you'll see you got VA loan addendum, you've got FHA-VA, but this one has Florida Realtors, Florida Bar. I'm going to select this one. Just a quick rule of thumb. So I'm at library. Here's all the forms available to me. I'm going to write an as-is offer. Select as-is residential contract. It's going to pull this up. Who's my seller? James L. Self. Who's my buyer? Well, it's John Smith. That's who I'm working with. Street address, pretty self-explanatory. Site address, 671 Northeast Gold Dust Road, Branford, Florida. I need to add the FL. When you copy paste, make sure that you're finishing everything out. Zip code here on the MLS is 32008. Located in Lafayette County, Florida, with a tax ID that I'm getting right from the property appraiser right here. Legal description. Right there off property appraiser. Remember, you can check the listing agreement video to see a little shortcut if it's not in a platted subdivision. Personal property. Now, let's say, for instance, on this, you can see right here, paragraph D, everything that's included by default, right? Refrigerators, ranges, ovens, that's included by default. What you don't see in there is washer and dryer. In this case, the seller is willing to leave the washer and dryer. So I'm going to add those to my contract. But this is a river house, okay? And these sellers are offering it furnished. So what I'm going to do here is include all furnishings and furniture within the home at the time of offer 04/20/2020. Okay, everything in the house is included. Remember, we're offering full price, $195,000. Initial deposit, escrow deposit. This is your good faith deposit. Typically, it's going to be made within 3 days. And in this case, we are going to say $1,500. Rule of thumb, the higher you can get this, the better. The more committed your customer is to the deal, and the more serious they will take this whole process. Some customers only have $300, $400, $500 in their account that they can part with for this amount of time. This will be applied towards the purchase price, or refunded to the buyer depending on the structure of the financing. And so the higher you can get this, the better, because this is held in escrow throughout the length of the transaction. And if push comes to shove, this is what everybody fights over. Who is the escrow agent? It's a good idea to ask the seller who's going to be as seller's agent, who's going to be closing this deal. And you might as well just put the deposit with them at the time of the offer, just to keep it simple, keep you from having to go pick up a check and then deliver it a second time. So in this case, the buyer is leaving it with Brent Barris. Their address, I would just look it up on Google normally, but let's just say 1234 Main Street. Phone number, email, fax. If an additional deposit is to be made, this is where we'll notate that. Every now and then, someone might make an additional deposit after they have put in, after their inspections are over. Maybe they're going to put another $5,000 down or something. It's more common to not have an additional deposit than it is to have an additional deposit. Financing. So we know in this case, our buyer is putting 20% down. So we want to express the dollar amount or percentage that is being financed. So if 20% is going down, that leaves 80% to be financed. I'm just going to type that in and then click, and then this is going to auto-populate. It's going to do the math, okay? If this was a cash deal, nothing would go there. And the buyer, after their deposit is to be applied, would need to bring $193,500 to closing. That's if it was cash. This is 20% down, owner finance. So we're financing 80, not owner finance, conventional finance. Time for acceptance. My rule of thumb is typically 48 hours. So today's April 20th. I'm going to get this offer signed by the buyer today. We want to know something by the 22nd. Conventional financing, the lender told me we could close this in 30 days. So I'm just going to go out 1 month. That's a Friday. Typically like to put my closings on a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, so that we can we're not in a time crunch to get one closed before the end of the week. So 1 month away would be about the 22nd. That's a Friday. I'm going to skip it out to Tuesday, 26th. This property is not subject to lease or occupancy after closing, so I'm not checking it. Assignability. 9 times out of 10, you're going to select either may assign but not be released from liability, or may not assign. May not assign is usually your simplest. That's your best go-to. And if your buyer needs to assign it, they'll bring it up to you. Financing. Buyer's not paying cash. If they were, we'd select A. But we're selecting B. This contract is contingent upon the buyer obtaining approval of a conventional mortgage within 30 days is going to be your standard. Interest rate, if you have one in mind or the lender is giving you one, you can put it there. Most of the time it's left blank for a term of, most of the time, 30 years. Let your buyer dictate how specific you go with that information. Typical costs and fees, we're just going to leave these as they are. unless we've discussed a different deal structure. Title evidence. This is kind of going to depend on whether you're cash or financing. For rule of thumb, you can leave it blank, or you can insert in a figure that you're more comfortable with. Seller, excuse me. Seller's typically going to pay for the owner policy and charges, and the buyer's typically going to pay for the buyer's side or the lender's policy and closing services. Let's say the buyer makes an offer and says, oh, I'll agree to pay all the closing costs. So that's when you would select B. But most of the time, you're going to select the first one. Home warranty, in this case, there is none involved. We're going to select option A here. This is most standard. If there's any seller assess or special assessment, seller's going to handle what they're responsible for up to the day of closing. After that, a buyer's going to pay the remaining. Inspection period. Here's where the difference between the as-is and the standard residential, the biggest difference is standard residential, which is not what we are writing right now, is going to state that some certain structural items have to be in good working order for this deal to close. As is, buyers agreeing to take it just as it explains, as is. This inspection period is the opportunity that the buyer has to hire a private inspector to come in and look at the house and give them a report. Now, let's say that within this as-is contract, we do an inspection and the buyer doesn't like what they see. Within this 15 days, which is your default, the buyer has the ability to walk away for any reason whatsoever. That's with the as-is. The standard contract, the buyer can only get out of the deal if an inspector does an inspection, finds problems that are more or less structural, and the seller refuses to make the repairs. So the way I describe to my customers the options available to them as far as an as-is offer or a standard offer is that the standard offer locks you into the deal a little bit more firmly, whereas the as-is gives you total freedom within your inspection period, in this case 15 days. You can change your mind for whatever reason and get out without penalty. Believe it or not, a lot of buyers would prefer the as-is contract. Now, if we do an inspection and we have an as-is contract and we find issues that we don't like, we can always go back and try to renegotiate this. We can always go back and ask for the repairs to be made. If the seller says no, then we walk away free and clear with no issue. If as long as you're having an inspection done, as is typically going to be your more simple type of deal. Just skipping over all this that doesn't have any blanks to fill in. So remember, this house, we can see the date it was built, 1978. We see that on the listing as well. And we know, because we are licensed realtors, that a house built 1978 or earlier requires what? Lead-based paint disclosure. And this additional addendum gives us all the options we might want to include. The only one we're checking here is the lead-based paint disclosure. We're going to come down here and let's say that the buyer's agent is John Jacobs with John Jacobs Realty LLC, and we would find that on the MLS down here by listing agent. Listing agent is Tucker Smith Daniel Kratz Agency, Inc. That's it. Okay, we're going to save, new transaction. And remember, our buyer is John Smith, so I'm going to name mine John Smith offer. It's saved. We're going to go to active. You can see there's that file, but remember we need the lead-based paint disclosure. So I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to search lead, and I'm going to find my lead-based paint disclosure. Remember, so here's one, here's another. This one is Florida Realtors, Florida Bar. So that's the one I'm going to check. Buyer, seller. Typically, you would fill out this form in this manner, that the seller has no known knowledge unless they tell you otherwise. Seller has no report unless they do. This is for the buyer to fill out. Most of the time what you're going to see is that they've received the 10-day opportunity, which is your inspection period, other mutually agreed upon period, in our case it's 15 days, or they just altogether waive the right lead-based paint. We would save it, and it would show up in our active file. Just like in the listing agreement video, we're going to save it as a PDF, get it signed, and present it to the listing agent.